One thing that will take pressure off inflation and potentially interest rates is the welcome fall in electricity prices for the bulk of Australians, which was announced today by the Australian Energy Regulator in a draft decision. Now, this decision could see households with no contract and no controlled load in Sydney and regions to its north with price falls of 3% from July 1. Now, for those in Western Sydney and the Illawarra, prices will fall 1.9%, and in rural New South Wales, prices will actually rise by 0.9%. Those in southeast Queensland, prices will rise 2.7% from July, and in South Australia, prices will fall 2.5%. Now, for small business, again with no contract and no control load, prices will fall between 9.7% in Sydney and to the north and to 8.2% in South Australia. In rural New South Wales, there's an increase for small business of 0.7%. The chair of the Australian Energy Regulator is Clare Savage, and I caught up with her earlier today.
Look, I'm sure it will be welcome news for many customers in southeast Queensland, New South Wales and South Australia. It's great to see that we're finally getting some reductions in power prices. So we have made a draft decision today. It's not our final decision. We still have a couple of months to go before we make that final decision. But currently we are estimating that the majority of customers will see price reductions from 1 July this year. And for those that don't get price reductions, the increases will be quite small, sort of less than 1% for many of them and up to 2.7% for the others.
But the reality of it is that prices are still significantly higher than what they were 3 years ago. And so, even though prices might have eased off, the reality is that they're still having to bear the cost that they've picked up over these past couple of years.
What we've seen is wholesale costs have come down quite significantly, not as much as we've seen in spot markets, because there is a build-up of contracts that are bought through time. So they will continue to moderate as we move forward. But what we are seeing is some increasing pressure in network costs. So that's the poles and wires that transport electricity. They're also subject to inflation and interest rate pressures, just like many households around the country. And we're seeing increasing costs coming through there as well. So yes, it isn't the sort of reductions compared to the increases we saw last year, but it's a good start, and we are starting to see power prices coming down.
There's no likelihood, I would suggest, with wage claims going through, that those networking costs are likely to come, if the price pressures are likely to come off them anytime soon. Is that your own reading of that as well?
So there's two different types of poles and wires. There's the high voltage transmission networks, which are the big power transmission towers you see across the country, and then there are the poles and wires that come into your home. What we're seeing is the bulk of the costs that we have in our power bills comes from those poles and wires in the home, and they have a range of cost drivers there. They have not just the inflation and interest rates as we talked about, but needing to upgrade for cyber security, climate resilience, making sure that they are able to withstand increased storm and bushfire activity, as well as some ageing infrastructure. So there's a bit of cost pressure coming through those networks, but we, hopefully we'll be able to see those being offset by decreases in the wholesale price.
You noticed in your report today that ministers had been exhorting you to try and find ways to be able to take the cost pressures off Australian homes. Is that an easy thing to do as a regulator when quite clearly all of the companies are reporting to you the rising prices that they're having to incur?
So we have taken account of their rising costs, so it's important to be clear about that. We're required under the regulations to make sure that retailers can recover their costs and make a reasonable margin. So we have done that in this decision today. We have put inflation onto the costs that they report to the ACCC to make sure that they're keeping pace with inflation in terms of their own costs. And we have applied a 6% margin on residential customers and 11% on small business customers. So we have weighed that up in our decision and made sure retailers can make that reasonable profit, but we've also ensured that we haven't provided any extra headroom or buffers, as you might like to call it, in order to actually protect consumers moving forward.
Okay, and then go to the actual energy markets themselves. You say that there seems to be more energy coming into that market. Are you happy with the amount of electricity that's being generated so that you can take price pressure off? Is there enough competition out there in that wholesale market?
Increased investment in generation capacity is going to be critical to bring down prices in the coming years. So we see there's a 206 gigawatts, which is about probably 4 times the size of our current power system, sitting there waiting to be built and developed in this country. And so it's really good to see governments, Commonwealth, New South Wales, Victoria and Queensland, South Australian governments, they're all out there trying to bring that investment to market, and bringing that new investment into the system along with the investment in transmission. So the big poles and wires to move it around the country will be critical to bringing power prices down into the future.
Just yesterday, you put up your latest report basically showing households that are under stress as a result of their energy bills and the number of people on payment plans, which is increasing significantly. My memory is more than 30,000 additional households have gone onto those types of schemes. Do you think that the interim decision today at least, might take some pressure off the number of households who are either defaulting on their energy bills or having to go to some sort of a scheme?
That data that you talk about really weighed heavily on us in our decision making. So we have seen increased numbers of Australians with 90-day debt, so with an energy bill that's more than 90 days overdue. That's now at 2.8% of customers. It was at 2.6% the previous quarter. And we have seen an increasing number of customers in hardship programs. Now, that can be a good thing because we are wanting to see retailers giving help and accessing or helping customers to access that help earlier. And that's certainly happening. We're seeing customers getting help sooner and with lower levels of debt, so it's a good thing. But when we were thinking about the decision today, we certainly did weigh up the impact that the previous 2 years of power prices have had on Australian households and the affordability of energy.
I'll tell you what, Clare Savage, always good to chat to you, and many thanks for your time today.
Thanks for having me, Ross.